Hello, everyone. I'm Harjit and I'm part of the Windows commercial team at Microsoft. Welcome to Tackling Tech. I'm really excited for this episode, for this show, because we're going to talk about Azure AD versus hybrid Azure AD and the myth busting around it. And I'm even more excited actually to have two of my colleagues and friends that I work with at Microsoft. And they are technical experts or technical specialists, Michael Hildebrand and Dave Davies. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
All right. So why don't we start with some introductions? Let people know what your role is and what you do, your experiences, and things like that.
Sure. Mike Hildebrand here with Microsoft. Hello, folks. Coming to you live from sunny, warm St. Louis, Missouri area. I'm a technical specialist, as Harjit said, focused on pre-sales work around a lot of our modern management tools, things like Intune, co-management, as well as the Windows operating system, Surface devices, and excited to be here to talk a little bit about some of the myth busting around hybrid join and direct cloud-only Azure AD join.
Thanks, Mike. And I'm Dave. I'm a UK-based cloud endpoint specialist, so very much the same sort of role that Mike has. Here in the UK, I work with many of our retail, travel, and transport customers. So it's always fascinating to hear where they are on that journey to modern management, help them understand some of the key challenges, and again, help bust some of those myths so that we can help you move forward into that cloud-first device.
Yeah, awesome. This is great. So I'm excited because you guys really work with customers and you hear, what they are dealing with and where they're going, right? So we know when we're working with our customers, they're pretty much well on their journey to modern management, right? But we also hear quite frequently, they ask questions like, in particular about, cross intersection of device join, right? That's one of the big hurdles. Azure AD versus hybrid Azure AD, and things like that, and device management, device identity, and things like that. Let's start there first. Like, let's talk about it. Well, what do you guys hear from your customers?
I think one of the interesting things I hear is a lot of customers are obviously they've been very familiar with that domain joined on-premises model for many, many years. I mean, we established what with Windows 2000 and NT4 back in the start of this century. So they're very familiar with that, very comfortable with the management and identity models that run with that. So it's often seen as quite a big shift to move to that cloud-first Azure AD joined only device.
Mhm.
And there's often a bit of trepidation there. Are my apps going to work? Can I authenticate? Can I manage the device in all the ways that I want to? And I think that's where it is often great to bust some of the myths in that area and help customers understand just how capable a cloud first Azure AD joined only device is. I often find that talking through a few key aspects there it really helps them move forward and look at that whole device identity join in a new way. I mean, that's definitely what I hear. How about yourself, Michael? Anything your side?
Yeah, it echoes the same patterns, the same comments. At this point in time, I think a lot of customers have, enough time has passed that there's fewer naysayers, but there are still quite a few folks who say we can't. Right, we can't do Azure AD join. We can't do modern management. We use GPOs. We need on-premises Active Directory, and I always try to turn that conversation a little bit and say, well, I think we can, or we can probably to a certain degree for a certain percentage. We live in a world of exceptions, right? So nothing is absolute. We can't get all the cases, but the products are mature. The solutions are well defined. We've got a lot of models and scenarios that are addressable with the cloud native join. Even if you still have on-premises applications or file servers or printers, the Azure AD join technology that Dave, I think you'll probably talk through a little bit more, allows us to use Kerberos still on those Azure AD join systems, authenticate, gain access to those on-premises resources, but still be cloud native joined and potentially probably cloud native managed through Intune and things like that.
Yeah, and I think it's natural that you say customers are making this journey in stages. A lot have already done a fair bit of that identity to the cloud. They're probably already syncing via Azure AD Connect to an Azure AD tenant. But you say maybe that device identity and moving it from that domain join to cloud first and Azure AD join, is that next step. And I think that's where hopefully on screen, we can now see a bit of an authentication flow. So let me talk through this for a minute or two, and hopefully illustrate just how capable, that cloud first device is.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You both of you mentioned cloud first and things like that. So let's take a look at some of the authentication workflows here.
Yeah, yeah. On screen, we've got kind of a fully, fleshed out diagram. So let's, just take this apart for a minute or two, talk about those flows, talk about what happens with this, cloud first device. So here in the bottom left, say we've got an Azure AD join device. In this particular icon, it shows as a laptop. It might be a laptop, it might be another device. It could be something like a Windows 365 cloud PC, but it's Azure AD joined only. There's no hybrid going on here. We're purely cloud first. So that device, is joined to your Azure AD tenant. It can access cloud resources. You've got single sign-on to online services such as Microsoft 365, and others. But the really cool thing here starts to come from Azure AD Connect, which we've got in place here behind the organization firewall. Azure AD Connect does that great synchronization from our on-premise Active Directory here in the top right out to the cloud, but it also does a few other really smart things. It actually synchronizes things such as domain names, UPNs, and those sort of things out so that Azure AD is aware of it. And that then means that this Azure AD joined only device is also aware of those on-premise Active Directories. Now, being aware of an on-premise AD is great, but when that device is outside the firewall, obviously I don't have a network line of sight, or capability to connect. But typically with these devices being laptops, cloud PCs, we can put a VPN on it. We can use a VPN tunnel, connect back securely. And this is where really some of the smart stuff that's just built into Windows and has been built into Windows 10, 11, all the way through comes into play. Because then, once we've got that network line of sight to an on-premise Active Directory controller, that cloud-first device can still use all the normal methods to look up a domain controller, grant itself and request a Kerberos ticket, and then, as we've got down here in the bottom left, this device and the user on that device now has a Kerberos ticket. Well, now we've got a Kerberos ticket, we're very much in the same situation as that traditional on-premises domain joined device. So we can take that Kerberos ticket, and over here in the bottom right, I'm just showing a simple file server, on-premises resource, but we can present that Kerberos ticket to that resource and be granted access. So, say, even though this device is cloud first, it still has that great capability to authenticate, once it's got line of sight to an on-premises domain controller, and say can then get access to on-premises resources. I think this is where a lot of customers feel that maybe they need the complexity of hybrid Azure AD join to get this capability, and actually it's all available just in a pure Azure AD join device.
Yeah, so Azure AD Connect is an important piece here, right? For on-premises resource access. Am I right?
Yeah, Azure AD Connect does that synchronization from the on-premise Active Directory out to the Azure AD tenant. It synchronizes all the normal stuff we're familiar with, a SAM account name, domain name, UPNs. But again, because it's synchronizing domain names out, that Azure AD joined only device knows which domain names to look up in on-premise. It uses the same DNS SRV records that a traditional domain joined device would use. So it's able to make that same connection to an on-premise Active Directory domain controller, and get that authorization through Kerberos.
One of the things I think that sometimes customers miss is a lot of these capabilities are baked in, but they're silently baked in, or it's quiet. It's not obvious. There's no flashing lights or indications that necessarily say these things are aware of one another. But it's a single plane, or it's an extended hybrid plane of authentication and identity, whether it's device identities or user identities groups, that this picture presents. And so you're not starting new in the cloud, you're extending and taking what you already have in Active Directory and extending that into your cloud instance that then gives you access to all the cloud goodness, but still you have this backwards compatibility with on-premises Kerberos capabilities and resources as well.
That's the magic words, right? On-premises Kerberos um, authentication. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. There's always the what ifs, right? Everybody asks that. So let's talk through some of the common, objections that we hear. What about user profiles? What about group policies? AD, machine authentication, which is pretty big. Printing and file shares and all that fun stuff. So is there something let's talk about that.
I love analogies. And so one of the analogies I use in talking through some of these changes is it's a different way of doing what you've done before. And the analogy I use sometimes is when you get a new model or a new brand of car. The car you've had for the last 5 years or whatever, you're used to the dashboard and the dials and the audio controls and the AC controls and the seat controls. And when you get a new car, especially if it's a different brand of car, the whole infotainment system is different. But still, through that system, you can turn the fan on and off and up and down. You can turn the temperature cooler or hotter. You can change a radio station. You can play a song on a USB or a phone or a CD. So it's just a new way of doing things that you did differently in the past. So you mentioned group policies and management. Cloud doesn't have the capability to connect to domain controllers, cloud devices, cloud joined systems, and process group policy. That's an on-premises Active Directory mechanism with sysvol and a service in Windows. But we do have Intune. We have the MDM channel. And now, for a long time, Intune didn't have nearly parity with all the GPO settings that we were used to. But times have changed, work's been done, Windows has iterated and been updated, Intune has iterated and been updated. And so now within Intune and within the Windows OS, we have a great set of capabilities. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's high 90s, I would expect, in having parity for group policy. So I can go into the Intune portal, I can drill down to ADMX settings, find the almost exact same setting for browser settings or the desktop image or JPEG you want as your background or the menu options. And I can set that in the Intune portal as if I was setting a group policy, but it uses the MDM channel to bring that down to that managed Windows device instead of the group policy service. So the group policy management snafu, I think, is almost resolved. And we also have a thing called policy analytics that lets you take your existing group policies that you maybe have developed on-prem and upload or import those into Intune, and then it'll compare the settings. And if we have a comparable set of settings, you can click a migrate button, and it'll generate the Intune policy based on that GPO. So the management story, the group policy, we can't do it because we use group policy is starting to fade away.
It's busted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that used to be the one of the big roadblocks. They are, but we got hundreds of good policies. We can't go to the cloud, and we've already shown that you can because we have those policies as you explained. Even things like logon scripts and things like that, right? I mean, we've got proactive remediations and things like that you can do through Intune to mitigate those things.
Yep, it's a matter of using some creativity, some ingenuity, again, just doing it maybe differently than the way you did it before. So we had group policy preferences, and that was a wonderful set of capability. And I know people are looking for that in the cloud, and I know we're doing some work to help bring certain aspects of that big set of group policy preference capabilities to the cloud. Some of them are already there, like you mentioned, Harjit. We can do things with scripts, remediations in Intune. People have gotten creative with doing drive mappings through scripts, through Intune, using Azure files and file shares as the back end for some of that file storage. So again, it's just a way of being creative and thinking through what you need to do, writing registry files. Maybe we can't do it the way we used to do it with group policy preferences with a nice GUI registry editor. But we can do it with, like I mentioned, Intune scripts or something like that writes the registry setting down. And then with the remediations, you can monitor that. You can ensure that that setting is getting laid down.
Exactly. And you can do PowerShell scripts and all that stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned about, policy analytics for group policies, right? To bring them over to MDM and stuff. But you can also do import or migrate your firewall settings that you've set. I believe that's through a script, right?
I'm not sure. I don't know, Dave, if you know, but I have seen some information about an easy button to bring firewall settings into Intune.
Yeah, probably like everyone else. I've not seen that one specifically myself, but as you say, I think for me, it's often been that session of it's worth making this journey as well. Group policy is amazing. Yeah, the number of settings in there are great. But I guess it was initially probably developed around Windows 2000. It's a product of that sort of time. And therefore, just making that step into modern MDM management brings other advantages. So that nice modern end user experience that I can get with a cloud first device.
Right. And I think I mentioned the firewall settings because our colleague Arnav actually had talked about it at a user group session. So it is possible. There's a group, there's a script and things like that actually pulls in your firewall settings and imports it into Intune. So it's pretty cool. Are there any challenges with help desk and IT management scenarios when you're doing Azure AD, or is that busted as well?
Yeah, I think again there's an interesting step there. We're used to customers who maybe have come from using SCCM remote control, and capabilities such as that. Great tools. Again, they're very much designed to realistically exist behind a firewall. Your distribution point, your device that's being controlled. Typically we expect to be on the same sort of network. Well, I think that's where again we've got other capabilities, particularly within products such as Intune Suite and products such as Remote Help, where now actually I can use that cloud-based remote control. And that also brings other advantages. I can have full authentication in that session. I can elevate commands and privileges when I need to. And we're even, I think in the last couple of weeks on one of the recent tech accelerators, demoed remote help for operating systems such as Android. So again, we can start to do that full enterprise-wide remote support and control.
Excellent. So yeah, this is great stuff. I love hearing all of this stuff. The one of the other things that usually comes up is applications. We can do Azure AD, or we can go to the cloud, and we still have to stay on premises because of our applications, and that is also not true, right? The only one scenario that I can see a challenge is machine account based applications.
And they're not always, but there will be apps still today that need something on-prem, whether it's domain computer accounts to be used for getting Kerberos tickets, or some other requirement or idiosyncrasy or development reason that they need whatever it is on premises. So we know that there's always going to be the outliers, the exceptions. But to your point, Harjit, generally high degree, high percentage of applications, if they use authentication for Active Directory, it's user-based. It's based on the group the user's in, and those will just work. The user, as Dave mentioned at the beginning, will get a Kerberos ticket, even on the Azure AD joined native cloud machine. And then that ticket is handed to the application system, and authentication proceeds as Kerberos always has. But true, machine accounts are the big sort of stumbling block for that on-prem domain joined computer account object. And if you have applications or systems that still need that, then those might have to be reviewed for either an application update or again, maybe a creative way or a different way of solving that problem. But from my experience, those applications are few and far between. I know there's some situations that are common. We're aware of those. We're working towards solutions for those. But corner cases, let's put them in the corner, and let's 80-20 rule or 90-10, 90%, 10% rule. See how much better we can get.
and I think one of the nice things there is starting off on that cloud first Azure AD joined device journey doesn't preclude you introducing hybrid Azure AD join at a later date. And say if you start on that cloud based journey, as Mike says, typically customers will find the vast majority of applications will be using user based authentication, so they'll just work. But as I say, if at a certain point in that journey you do run into that one, I don't know, logistics depot management app or something like that, and it is still using machine based and computer accounts to authenticate, well, hybrid is ready to join. It's still something you can configure, still something you can deploy an autopilot template on. But as I say, you can start on that modern approach first, and only really go down that hybrid route if you really need it, and therefore only do the work if you really have to.
Yeah, no big bangs. It's not an all or nothing game here. We want to meet customers where they are and let them proceed at their own pace of change. Some people are quick and want to do it fast. Let's kind of break the ties and get to full native cloud. Others, it's just for whatever reasons, it takes longer. But we support all those in betweens and allow that sort of, baby step, crawl, walk, run type model to get towards progress and future and modern.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned it's all or nothing, right? It's not. That's not what we're saying. We want to, like you said, we want to meet our customers where they are, what they're using now, and we're trying to get them to a better place, right? So same thing with Windows, right? We're saying, hey, you don't have to do all Windows 11. You can still, coexist with Windows 10. You can do Windows 10 and 11, and when you're ready, when you have hardware ready devices, right, that meets Windows 11, then you can move to the next segment. Same thing we talk about Intune and Config Manager, right? If you're still using Config Manager, well, you can do co-management, you can do CMG, you can do cloud attach and all that stuff with Intune, right? So there's solutions to meet our customers wherever they are. I'm glad also that I think Dave, you mentioned autopilot. As you know, when I was a customer engineer, and I was working with customers all the time and stuff like that. And one of the things that they really wanted to do is like move away from the traditional imaging of machines, right, devices and stuff, and they want to do provisioning. But we're trying to remain on hybrid Azure AD join scenarios. And I'll put it out there, autopilot is challenging because it requires a lot of uh, things, right? Line of sight and things like that for when you're doing hybrid. But when they flip over to Azure AD, it works. They see a lot of positivity through that. Is that something you guys are seeing as well, right?
Yeah, definitely so. And I think it's often a scenario where you say these two desires and aims or almost have a bit of tension. You say everyone wants that great end user experience, that fast deployment of an autopilot device. But quite rightly, IT teams, they want to retain that access to on-premise applications. And therefore there's a natural tendency there to maybe believe that you do need hybrid Azure AD join. And that's where, say, I think actually flipping that model using autopilot with a zero AD join only, really gives you the best of both worlds. You've got that high capability and confidence of being able to use apps and services on premises, and you've got that easiest, simplest deployment method. Hybrid Azure AD join with autopilot, yeah, absolutely, fully supported, exists. But as you say, I think the best description I've heard is there's a lot of moving parts.
There's a lot of moving parts, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every one of those is also then, for IT, that's always a point of failure. It's something that might go wrong in the next deployment. It might generate another service desk ticket. So again, moving into this modern world, hopefully helps, the IT organization, reduce the effort to deploy and also just reduce, the amount of work, that you're going to get. Whereas say, if you're using hybrid, I've got to spin up a VPN before signing in. I've got to, create that device object through the Intune AD connector. There's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah. And, one of the advices that, I've seen given to customers, and I do the same, you have devices, a ton of devices, and you want to shift over to Azure AD, but it's not possible to flip your hybrid Azure AD join devices automatically. There's no magic button there, and with this has come up in conversations lately. Yes, is there a script? Is there something? No, you can't. Right? You gotta refresh it. You gotta reset it. You gotta do all that stuff. So what we're saying, and I know you guys are probably saying the same thing, keep your existing devices, as is on hybrid. Keep working the way it is, no problem. But anything, net new, if you're, deploying brand new devices or you're refreshing devices, that is when you move into the Azure AD, mode or era, right?
Yeah.
So they can both coexist, and then once you start moving slowly or as quickly as you want, then you start flushing out the hybrid, scenarios.
And as you say, new device deployment, maybe that's new hardware purchases, maybe it's a device refresh. That's a great point in time to start doing it. Other approaches I've seen a couple of customers take again is maybe when they're starting to look at Windows 365. So using a cloud PC, great time to start using Azure AD Join. And whilst I'm not at the engineering level, so don't have figures, I think we tend to see that in Windows 365, probably the majority of cloud PCs are deployed in that Azure AD Join model.
Yeah. And speaking of Windows 365, we have seen customers that don't have or unable to actually refresh your devices to Windows 11 ready devices at this point, but they want to use Windows 11. They want to get the capabilities and productivity and accessibility features and things like that of Windows 11. So what they have done is they're using Windows 365 to get there, to get their users the experience of Windows 11. And again, everything's Azure AD and all the good stuff right there.
One of the things I'll throw a quick comment in there. You mentioned, keep on with hybrid join for your existing devices. Try to sort of break point for new devices through the cloud native Azure AD join model. And there's a little middle ground or a middle step that I try to remind or talk through with customers is test, right? Deploy an Azure AD joined machine in your environment, see what apps work, see what apps don't work. I think generally people are pretty surprised at how well things do work, but then there will probably be some things that maybe don't work or don't work as expected. Document those things, triage those things, look for policy gaps that don't match what you need it to be, work through those issues, and then you've got your solution as you progress and go forward. Now you've got a corporate compatible and compliant system that meets all the check boxes that you need for your security policy and information protection policy, but it's cloud native.
And I think there's one really interesting thing there. You mentioned kind of the security word there, Michael. And I once had a customer first kind of point this out to me. When you're moving into that cloud first model, realistically, you're moving that device into a zero trust model. It now starts its life outside the corporate boundary, outside the firewall. It's effectively not trusted. It's in that zero trust model, and it's got to validate all its access. Now, it can do that through great tools such as conditional access, but that does mean that you're actually making a great change in security posture there. You're moving quite a far way down that zero trust model, and you're able to actually start treating those devices in a modern security manner as well as just modern deployment.
I love it. All right, so I've got one more thing I got to ask, because this comes up every now and then from people. It's like, okay, so please explain to me, like, there's Azure AD Join, there's hybrid Azure AD Join, and then there's Azure AD Register. What's the difference? What's Azure AD Register versus Azure AD Join?
Good question. I'm frankly trying to think of the Microsoft Learn definitions off the top of my head. But I guess with both a hybrid Azure AD Join and an Azure AD Join, they're effectively designed for corporately owned devices. They're assets that an organization owns, purchases, and therefore, they're effectively showing up in Intune as that corporate asset. And therefore, they can get access to resources. they can do things. Typically, an Azure AD registered device is more often maybe a personally owned consumer device that maybe I've joined to my corporate because maybe my organization's MDM policies allow it, and I might get limited access to things such as maybe the Office web apps or other encapsulated apps in that way. So again, if I remember correctly, and please don't 100% quote me on this, an Azure AD registered device shows up as a personally owned device within Intune, and again, is treated as such.
Yes. So normally what you see, what happens is a lot of people see, they'll go to, the Azure portal and stuff like that, and they'll see, hey, what? How come I got these devices here? I didn't do anything to it. And, it's basically like when you're, connecting to Microsoft Teams for the first time or one of those web apps, like you said, that's what it's kind of just registering and getting you the policies and stuff. Did you have anything to add, Mike? Or are we on the right track with that?
Yeah, I think of the Azure AD joined as cloud native, directly connected through certificate exchange based at the device level between that computer's Windows operating system and then Azure AD, the cloud service. And then hybrid join device is basically a domain join Windows PC like we've had for decades that also extends itself into the identity space of Azure AD. So it does a certificate exchange also at the device level, but it's basically a domain joined Windows PC that's also got one foot in Azure AD. And then the Azure AD registered is, I think, user-based, things for like single sign-on of the user, but it's not as deeply ingrained at the device level. And like Dave said, it's oftentimes a personal device or a BYO device, or the app prompts for that registration.
Yes, absolutely. I think we hit this on the nail. So, hey guys, seriously, thank you so much for being here, and especially on short notice. And this is a great topic. It's a big topic, and we want to help our customers get to the cloud and Azure AD and all that fun stuff. And you guys busted some myths and all that stuff. That's great. Really, really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll have you guys back at sometime in the future.
Look forward to it.
Thank you for watching Tackling Tech. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. Please like and subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with the latest episodes. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, please let us know in the comments below. You can also follow me on Twitter for more updates and behind the scenes looks of Tackling Tech. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.